And so now we finally got back to make everybody's name bronze the way it was intended, and now we have a vanilla lager, actual lager.
So as we move on to this, it's a very malt-forward, dark lager, very Australian, or not Australian.
Yes.
Austrian.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
Jim showed up. All right.
Austrian.
Good night, mate.
You call that a knife?
Cheers.
You stumbled on into the Tap Takeover Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tap Takeover Podcast. Today, we continue our brewery interview series with a return to the Lincoln Warehouse. This is now our third visit to this incubator at the corner of First and Beecher. We've been here for Eagle Park and Enlightened, and today we visit Component Brewery. The Kowalske family has started this in the same space that Eagle Park has, and we're as excited as we were when we came to visit Eagle Park. So today, DJ, Jonathan, and Steve share responsibilities in running this brewery. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And as we always do, let's put some names to the voices. I'm Jim.
I'm Steve.
Jonathan.
DJ.
Jesus.
And I'm Alex. So let's get into, let's go right back to the beginning with you guys. What were the sort of beers that kind of got the creative juices flowing? What were the craft beers that inspired you guys to start your own brewery?
We could go way back to sort of some of the first craft beers, I guess, that were maybe before we were even brewing. Something that I remember going to when I was at school at Whitewater, we had a kegerator that we would always try to have something halfway decent. And the last thing, something that always comes back was Liney's Creamy Dark was something that we always had on draft in there, which was something that kept people away sometimes because they always wanted, Keystone or, Natty Light or something. So it was something we could have, and when people came over, they weren't always getting into it. But, I mean, that's way before. I'd done some home brewing maybe once or twice before that, but it was kind of on a whim, nothing too serious. We got into, I mean, the way we kind of got started was John was home brewing pretty seriously before Steve and I really were, and I was living in Boston. I'd come back and have some of his beers, and they were really good. I mean, compared to things that I had homebrewed, they were incredible. So that was kind of the start, and that was, I don't know, 7-8 years ago probably. So that was kind of the start of the homebrew, and then we started all kind of homebrewing together. So that was definitely part of the process.
So talk to us about that genesis. We've heard a lot of stories about guys sitting around drinking beer and going, "We really should do this." How did Component come together?
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, it was kind of we were homebrewing, and I don't know that we ever took it very seriously or really had that thought. It was just something fun to do. I've got kids, John's got kids, so we could hang out and have the kids together and the families together and brew. And I mean, all we did was talk about beer anyway, so it was just kind of a natural progression to make it as well. So, I mean, I'm sure we talked about it, and I gave John, a hard time. Like, this beer is, I paid $8 for a beer that's just as good in Boston. You should be working in beer or something like that. But never, I don't know, there was much more than much of a thought to it at that point.
No, I think when this is like 2 years ago when we were picking hops in your backyard, we were all there and we're like, we should open a brewery. So there was that too. Yeah.
I always have grown. I always like growing things, and so I've had some Cascade growing in the backyard, and that's just something that's fun. Almost just gets in the way more than anything, but I still do it every year.
And it's something that we put in the beers that we have made here.
Yeah, once we opened up, it was like, all right, well, doing all this work. I mean, you do all this work to pick all these hops and everything, and then get done, and you end up with, not very much. But luckily for us, we have a tiny brewery, so it still works out.
So that was the aha moment, but what was the aha beer? What was the beer that people were like, holy cow, you guys are really good at this?
Since we've been here?
I guess before you even started here, whether it wasn't just like picking hops, must have been the beer that really caught on with your friends, family, that was just like, you guys should really take this seriously, open up a place.
Yeah, I think it was the Mosaic IPA. one of my first homebrew recipes, and I always had it on tap in my house, and it was gone, as soon as I could make it. We've been doing iterations of that beer with different hops since we started. We call it the Mosaic Theory. We've done Galaxy Theory. We've done Nelson Citra Theory. I just brewed another one today, trying to figure out what hops we're going to do with it.
Nice. I think that's really fun, and everything that I've noticed when I've come in is that I don't know. You guys are brewing styles that we like. You guys are getting into the kettle sours. You guys are getting into the beautiful New England style IPAs. I mean, you guys are ahead of the game. Compared to a lot of breweries as far as doing what the folks are buying these days. Was that a conscious choice, or was that just kind of where your home brewing path kind of led you? Were those the styles that you guys were already getting into?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I mean, John always was happy to experiment with anything. I think once we had thoughts in our mind that we were going to try to do this, then we started really even experimenting more at home. But I mean, hazies, yes, kettle sour, and even Pilsner were things we started to experiment with. But I mean, he always would have a stout or a West Coast IPA, or just kind of all over the board. So that's, I think, what's kind of happening here too. We just can't really help ourselves, try to be pigeonholed in anything. I mean, it's whatever, especially with such a small system. It's what's seasonal. What do you want to make next? We've never held ourselves to. I mean, we've always said we want to have a few beers that are somewhat of a flagship, but other than that, it's just whatever we're feeling. So it's nice.
So, Steve, we want to get you on the podcast too.
He's watching the game.
Yeah,
what sort of beers are you brewing that you would kind of take a little bit of credit for? What's your style, if you could pinpoint it?
I would say New England's is what I enjoy the most. They try to keep me out of the brewery as much as possible towards the end. Was it 2 days ago? I think I put a hop in I shouldn't have, and it won't be a bad thing.
Happy mistake.
Yeah,
you never know.
Right.
Might work out.
But I'd say New England's. Starting to enjoy kettle sours a little more and more. You don't really see them out, I feel like, too often. And even when I am out, I'm still going New England's.
Yeah, it's hard to stop being a hophead.
Yeah. I mean, we're brewing what we like to drink. A lot of it is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, speaking of liking to drink, as we like to do on the podcast, we're doing a little live tasting. And as we like to ask most of our brewers on the podcast here, if you guys could take over the taps at the Tap Takeover Podcast and kind of tell the story of your brewery through some of those beer choices, which of your beers that you have on currently, or that you have in the bullpen ready to go, which of those beers would you kind of choose to tell that story?
I think the first one might be the Kettle Sour Roses Sour. So when we were experimenting with kettle sours at home, it was more of the first few that we tried were just kind of IPA sours. There was no fruit going on. It was just a decent amount of hops, and seeing how that would actually hold up in a kettle sour, because we were pretty interested in that. And the first few batches were really, really good. But once we got in here, we had a cooler, we had some space. We had ordered some fruit for, I don't even know if we really knew that it was going into this sour, but it just kind of popped in John's head. I think it was just like, well, let's fruit this thing. And the raspberry, and so it's a raspberry and mango kettle sour, and a lot of people think it has kind of a grapefruit. The combination of that with the sourness is kind of grapefruity, and I agree. I think it's in a really interesting way. Oh yeah, I mean we still put plenty of hops in it.
Really, because that is like the antithesis of the kettle sour. It's like minimal IBU, right? Especially because Lactobacillus just doesn't like IBUs at all.
Right. It's all Whirlpool.
Okay.
Yeah. So we Whirlpool, and then it just works, and it's one of these things that we just can't. We don't want to mess with. It's worked so well that we just don't want to mess with it. But once it came out and it was done, we have a connection to Bayview. Our great grandparents lived on Chase Avenue, and the color came out like this beautiful rose color, and our great grandma's name was Rose, so it was like, oh, perfect, Rose is sour. So it was kind of just we're not the most creative guys around, but that one just kind of, there was no way it named itself almost.
Yeah, it's very fruit forward, which is fantastic. It's what I really like about this new wave of kettle sours. I mean, I don't even know if we could really call them Berliner Weisses anymore. I mean, the style, but what Americans are really doing with this style is just fantastic. The fruit is right in your face, and it's got a great tartness to it as well.
Yeah, I think the Berliners are a little jealous of where you guys are taking the style these days.
I want to touch on something you mentioned, that you already had something set up for you. Do you think you're at an advantage following Eagle Park into this space with some of, and go back to episode 7 with our episode with Eagle Park to understand some of the challenges they face in their space? Do you think you had some advantages coming into a space that was already occupied?
Yeah, I think there's the ums, so. No, moving in here after Eagle Park, I mean, we can call Jackson or text him, and he'll answer any questions. Like, the brewing community in Milwaukee is very collaborative, and send out an email if we need some grain or something like that. So there's been a lot of, not help, but if we need something, people are there for us. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, they took quite a jump putting a tap room in kind of this strange place, right? Like on the second floor of a warehouse, and so they definitely broke some ground there for us. Very helpful, and there's probably a lot of locals that still will come here. I'm sure they go to Eagle Park too. I know they do, but they still can walk here if they live down the street. So that's kind of nice, right? We had somewhat of an established base. If the beer was good enough, they'd probably come back and check us out again.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting space. Being on the second floor of in a warehouse, you guys have a lot of cool neighbors, a lot of interesting folks also using these spaces. You guys also have a distillery downstairs. Is there any talk with that distillery about maybe using some of their barrels with some of your beers, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I heard they just might have some their first rye coming out soon. So yeah, it's been on our mind, but we haven't really bugged Brian about it. But I'm pretty sure they're somewhere in the warehouse, so it might be easy to get our hands on.
Cool.
Yeah. So I mean, the stuff they come up with is very interesting. So yeah, they definitely have a lot of barrels laying around that we could put to good use. Well,
speaking of which, let's get back to that tap takeover. And do you guys have a couple more beers that you could throw on? I notice you guys have put a barrel-aged coffee stout with no coffee in front of us. Explain that one to us.
Well, this one's a little bit messy. It does have coffee in it. So the original recipe is coffee, no coffee, and it doesn't have any coffee in it. It just had a lot of roast. It had a really good sort of coffee flavor. We, of course, couldn't help ourselves, and we start messing with it. And so it was coffee, no coffee with coffee. If it was coffee, no coffee with chocolate and coffee. We just can't help messing with stuff. This version happens to be one with some coffee in it from Stone Creek, and it also has cocoa nibs from the chocolate guys downstairs at Melt Chocolate. And we just felt like if it was going into a barrel, we needed some coffee in there to really help it kind of stand up a little bit to that bourbon. So, and the bourbon, of course, the barrel came from the barrel broker. Who else? Right. And it's our first experiment with it, and so it was literally an experiment. It was just let's brew a batch and throw it in there and see how it goes. And yeah, we're really excited about it. It was a lot of fun.
It's a really light beer.
No. No, it's got a great mouthfeel on it. The bourbon's really shining through. There's a deep, rich coffee flavor coming across, some big roasted notes, I think, from both coffee and probably your malts. And definitely, a chocolate finish right there at the end. It's really good.
Yeah, thanks.
That coffee is beautiful. How long did this spend in a barrel for you guys?
Shorter than probably most. 3 months, was it? Yeah, so with that smaller surface area, we've been told it might be a little bit quicker because it was just a 15-gallon barrel. So so after 3 months, it was just happened to time it for St. Patrick's Day as well. So
nice. Yeah, it's perfect. The balance with the coffee and everything, it's just a very smooth beer at 12%.
So let's talk about, we always ask brewers too about branding. So you have a really cool logo. Tell us about who kind of put this together for you and the name, Component Brewing.
It was a really difficult process to come up with a name. I mean, there's 6,000, 7,000, however many breweries in the U.S. now, and we had a few names that were kicking around, and you start looking around at all the other names that are out there. It's like, it's just either it is a name, or it sounds too much like a name, or it just didn't. So it was challenging. We knew we had to. It wasn't something that we had ready. I think when when we knew we were going to start this, I said, "Okay, John, what's the name?" Thinking that he had one, and when he said, "I have no idea," it was like, "Oh man, all right, let's get started on this." So luckily, John has a friend who works as a graphic designer, and we'll get to the design in a minute. But she basically sat with us and sort of brainstormed, and she just listened to us. I mean, we just sit and talk like we normally do, and it, of course, was probably 99% about beer, 1% about our kids annoying us or something. And she actually came up with a name. You know, she said just the way we were talking about brewing as sort of water quality and that component, and then, you know, we would talk about a beer that we just changed the hop, and that was it, and that was the hop component, and did we change anything to the grain component. So it just kind of came out of our discussions, and it just fit so well because we knew that once we started this thing, it was the beer components, and then it's a component of us, you know, and it's an extension of us now. It's our part of our life because we all have day jobs. We spend a lot of time here too. It just it felt like it worked on a lot of levels for us.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool name, and I really dig the logo. I love the orange and the white. It's very, very basic, very simple, but I don't know. It's also very striking, and in a very crowded beer, environment that we find ourselves in, it's tough to stand out. And I think you guys definitely stand out. It's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the thought process behind the symbolism that you guys have there?
Yeah, it wasn't growing hops at home and just being I was actually, before we started this, I was interested in starting like a hobby farm growing hops, so I had a bit of an obsession and still do. Obviously, that's kind of
how many hops are you growing in your backyard now? Is it more than Cascade?
No, it's still. So I had some Chinook going, but I think the Cascade pretty much just took those out. Like it was just they do not hold up. Cascade is just incredible, just a weed. I mean, it is nuts. So of course we wanted to have, it had to have a hop on it, and really Erin just kind of took it from there, and she had a few different ideas, and our last name being a good Irish name like Kowalske, she had a couple good ideas that were like a little more.
Isn't that old Kowalske?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So she kind of just took it from there, and it really was. I don't know if the orange works so well because of the kind of the warehouse feel too, the kind of industrial feel. It's like the safety orange almost. It's kind of just, it does stick out like you said, and we always enjoyed that. It was something that on the wall here that it brings your attention, and like you mentioned, that was really the goal.
Speaking of the walls, this is the first time I'm in this space with Component. But what's up with is this a changing art exhibit you have here, or what do you have kind of displayed around here?
Yeah, it's a local artist.
And just think this makes great radio, so just don't point at stuff.
Right. Yeah. Look at that one over there.
Yeah, look at that one. Can I show you this to my right?
That's the best one.
No, tell us about what you got going on here.
So roughly every month, a new local artist will be displaying their work. And that's set up through the first artist that we had in here. She's kind of reaching out to other artists and finding new ones to come in. Right now there's actually 2 different artists, I believe, both from Bayview, that are in here now.
So it's the art component to the brewing.
It is. It is. And so Bayview has Bayview Gallery Night, where different places bring in artists and open their doors and kind of set bars that might not normally look like a gallery. That was our first introduction to it, and once the stuff was on the wall, it was like, this is great. I mean, we're not going to find anything better than what people come up with, so let's keep this going. And it's been great. I know they've been selling paintings as well, so it's always awesome. Helps them out as well.
Well, I'm a big fan of the artwork that's on the walls right now. We're going to take a lot of pictures, so check out the website so you can see what we're talking about. But it's a real Marvel feel right now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of superheroes. Yeah. I definitely see the new Spider-Man. There's the Black Panther on the wall. Very cool stuff, and very bright. Very It just everything pops on the walls. It's very cool setup you guys got.
Yeah, thanks. It's when you're in a sort of square room like this in an industrial building, color is very helpful. Keep the lights, keep the light up. So otherwise, we don't want there's not a ton of windows in here, so we need something to bring the light out.
So you've mentioned that all you have day jobs. So there's not one dedicated person running the show here. So how do you guys divide up responsibilities? Because this is actually unique for us.
John does everything.
A little bit here, a little bit there. I mean, it's all over the place.
And there must be, because you guys are dividing responsibilities. Stephen mentioned that perhaps a hop that shouldn't have gone into a beer did. Are there any other kind of
It's not the only time that happened.
Any happy accidents out of those situations?
Yeah.
We'll find out in a couple days after it's in the bright tank, because it's getting moved tomorrow.
There's been one of the better ones that I don't know. We'll just go for it. So one of the beers there is everybody's named Franz. That's what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a Vienna lager, and there's a little bit of a story behind the name. But the first time we brewed it, I don't know, Steve, me, not Jonathan.
It was me.
Ended up using ale yeast instead of lager yeast, and so it was like, well, let's just see what happens. I mean, there's no reason to get upset yet. Let's see what it turned out to, and it turned out being a perfectly fine sort of amber ale. It had all the things you could ask for, and so we've tweaked it a little bit, but we've kept it around, and so now we finally got back to make everybody's name Franz the way it was intended, and now we have a vanilla lager, actual lager.
So as we move on to this, it's a very malt forward, dark lager, very Australian, or not Australian.
Yes.
Austrian.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Jim showed up. All right.
Austrian.
Good night, mate.
You call that a knife?
I'm getting Munich malt in this. As a lager, it's malt forward, but still dry, crisp. Really great.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe a little darker than a traditional Vienna lager. I don't know. We got a few comments on that, but that's the kind of thing that we don't worry about too much. I mean, we're not purists by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we make a Pilsner that's probably the most traditional Pilsner because it's a German Pilsner, but everything else is kind of like, it's some variation therefrom. It's, something close.
Yeah, what? To me, what's most exciting is that so far we've had a sour, we've had a barrel-aged stout, and now a lager.
Yeah.
These are divergent styles as you can get, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are brewing them all. I mean, that's really fantastic. Like, you guys are just brewing what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think we've always said that. I mean, lager was one of the first things we brewed. We brewed the Pilsner, I think, was the first thing we made here. It's difficult with a small system, and we're getting to the point now where it's getting even harder just to keep up with demand. But we really try. We really just... So many people come in here and that's what they're looking for. And they're looking for, they want the lightest beer on, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problem serving a Pilsner to anybody.
Yeah.
It's something we enjoy too.
It's really impressive to me that you guys just opened last year, right? The fact that you guys are this dialed in on your recipes already, do you credit that to your homebrewing days? Were you guys dialing in those recipes during the homebrewing days, or have you guys just, working on a smaller system, been able to knock those recipes out more often and able to dial them in that way?
I would say it's both. When we opened, we knew we needed to have good beer because there were so many different breweries opening in Milwaukee that have been making great beer. And in order to be on par with everybody else, we would need to put our best foot forward. And we put a lot of effort into making sure that the recipes were on point and our process was on point. And, we were making the best beer we possibly could.
Yeah, the homebrewing definitely helped. Having those recipes to start with and just kind of feel comfortable, and to go from 5 gallons to 50 gallons wasn't as big of a jump as a lot of people probably make when they buy a 7, 10, 15, 20, whatever barrel system. Those that have made the homebrew jump, I'm sure the pros really maybe don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, we spoke with the head brewer at Tyranina, and he told us that their pilot system is 30 barrels. I mean, it takes some balls.
Yeah.
It takes some balls to make that your pilot system. But no, I think it's really fun, and it's an advantage I think that you guys have, especially in today's beer environment where people want the freshest, the newest, the craziest stuff that you guys can put out. That you guys are working on a smaller system, and you have that ability to just put out new stuff basically every week. How often does your lineup change over?
Yeah, I mean, it is weekly just because of how fast we go through stuff. So we're brewing 2 to 3 times a week sometimes just to keep up with that. And so we'll try to have those, some of the beers we're talking about today, always have those on, but it's challenging, especially if we're experimenting and just kind of moving on to the next recipe. I mean, if something goes quick, there's a few recipes that will go through the full barrel in a weekend, so that's a little challenging to keep up with.
Okay, I think this is a good time to take a little break. We're going to do a little bit of beer news, but when we come back, we'll continue the Tap Takeover.
And we should also mention that some of the ambient noise you're hearing tonight is because this is the beginning of the NCAA tournament. So you're going to hear a little bit of that on the podcast. And I think it's a good time to take a break and maybe watch a little bit of the tournament.
This is Jonathan from Component Brewing, and you're listening to the Tap Takeover Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast.
So we want to get back into some of the beers, and you guys mentioned in the first half of the interview that you guys don't think you're very good at beer names, and I want to challenge you on that because I'm very impressed with two of your New England style IPAs that I've tried, and I'm also very impressed with the names. Haze the Lord is a great name for a New England style IPA, and Down the Road a piece. Is there a little bit of a story behind that one, or what were you guys going for?
I can take Down the Road a piece. I lived in Boston for 10 years. I worked on fishing boats for a while, and so that would be anywhere from Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, that whole New England, obviously covered the whole area. And so I've got a lot of friends out there, and I was like, well, if we're going to name a New England, who better to ask than, someone in New England. We'll give them credit. And Down the Road a piece is just something that people from Maine use as how far away is something? It's down the road a piece. And so that's where it came from. So all credit to a good friend of mine. But it was just an easy thing I haven't done I've stayed away from fishing type things. It just kind of feels like a bit of a stretch. As much as I love fishing and working on commercial fishing boats, I have that background. It was much easier to stick to something that was a little more generic.
So, DJ, are you in charge of naming most of the beers, or Jonathan and Steve, do you guys get in on that?
Yes and no. Haze the Lord came up, but we were in back. We were supposed to be making just a standard IPA. John came back there and he said, I changed the recipe up. I put oats in it. And I believe my response was, Haze the Lord. and then that's how that one came.
You're hazing everything.
I thought you were going to say we added flour, and
we don't tell people about that.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm really impressed with the Haze the Lord. What sort of hops are going on in this one? Because it's tasting fantastic.
It's pretty standard. Dry hops are Citra, Eldorado, Mosaic.
Yeah, we can't get away from Mosaic. I think we just if we ever have a bigger brewery, we'll just order it by the truckload, I think.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Mosaic. The tropical flavor that it imparts, and then you round it out with the Citra. You get that nice citrus and a little bit of Eldorado. You got a good beer there. How about Down the Road a piece? What kind of hops are we working with on that one?
I just kind of reach into the freezer and grab whatever I'm feeling.
We don't want you in charge of that stuff.
We're not going for consistency. We're just going for something interesting.
Sorry, down the road, we have a little Galaxy, some Mosaic, and Simcoe. Oh, a little Citra, too.
Nice, yeah. Galaxy and Mosaic. You're speaking our language right now.
So how is sourcing Galaxy? Because even though it's a great hop, it's very hard to get. So for a brewery your size, how do you even source Galaxy?
I'll get an email when it's available from some of our suppliers, and if you don't jump on it right away, you won't get it. So you have to, when the email comes in, just buy it.
Yeah, the spot market is our friend. So whatever comes available, and it's to our benefit. I mean, those smaller sizes that are on there a lot of times are other brewers just trying to offload what they have if it's getting to be a year old or something. It helps being small.
So is getting the freshest, best hops, is that the equivalent of what we're dealing with, trying to get the haziest, craziest, newest beers for a beer drinker?
Yeah, for sure. All of the breweries are going after the same hops. I mean, the sexy Galaxy, Nelson, stuff like that. Price drives up. Everybody wants it.
So what other challenges do you guys face being this size, and what do you do to compensate for it?
Sourcing ingredients isn't too bad. I mean, we can go down to proximity or, having so many local sort of people to partner with in that space is helpful, and we can go and grab a few bags of grain and we're ready to go. And if we're short a bag, someone can probably spot us one. It's not like we need 1,000 pounds of anything when we brew. So that's been beneficial. I mean, obviously from a cost perspective, probably not the best, but at this point, kind of in the startup phase that we're in, it's not something we worry about too much. We're more focused on quality product, so it's not something we kind of just go for whatever we want to get into.
So do you worry much about yield, right? Because especially the hazies, you dry hop a lot, and that reduces your yield. That affects your margin. As you continue through the startup phase, and as you go down the road, I assume you're looking to expand. What are your plans to evolve?
Yeah, so we'd love to stay in. We were definitely thinking about expanding. We've had a great run here. We've actually only been open since end of June, and it's been great. A lot of good feedback on the beers, and just a really good sort of core crew of people that keep us going here. So yeah, we'd love to stay in Bayview. We just love what's going on here. I mean, across the street there's a huge office going in, and supposedly condos and a boutique hotel, and then the whole Harbor District down the street. So we don't see any reason to leave Bayview anytime soon. And just kind of it's nice having the ties there from our great grandparents. We remember coming down here when we were little kids. Obviously a much different place 30 years ago, 30-something years ago. But I don't know how many people would walk around where we are right now. Probably back 30 years ago, it probably wasn't the best place to hang out. But yeah, it's certainly come a long way.
Yeah, so how does it feel to know that you guys are making Bayview like a little sexier? A little, especially the north part of Bayview here, where there's not necessarily a lot of stuff, but it looks like it's kind of growing around you guys. It looks like you guys are going to kind of, I don't know. We were talking during the break. You guys said this might be like the epicenter of the north end of Bayview now. What does that feel like to know that you guys are a part of that?
Yeah, I mean, the timing is everything, right? Location's also everything. It just feels like there's sort of a movement from, it was the 3rd Ward, the 5th Ward, Walker's Point, and now to Bayview. It just kind of keeps moving south, and so it feels like a really good spot to be in, and obviously there's a ton of support from the community to sort of keep that going. And I think having breweries in sort of neighborhood setups like we are, it's just, we bring our kids in here, dogs can come in here, it's very much a community spot, and we're trying to figure out ways to partner more with some of those local, whether it's charities or really any group, just to keep that connection going.
Okay, so we know you want to stay here. We know you want to set your roots in Bayview. What about getting your beer out there further? Right now, your beer's available at the tap room. Where else can people get it, or what's your plans for distribution?
Where are we at? Sugar Maple and
Sugar Maple right now, pretty much.
So down the street.
Yeah. So down the road a piece.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Callback.
Yeah. Sugar Maple, and we have a pretty steady tap line at Hale House in Hale's Corners.
Because John lives down the street, and that's where he likes to go get a beer when he leaves here.
It's very convenient.
Are you guys doing any packaging at all? Can people come down a growler fill or a crawler? And do you do any canning or bottling? Yeah,
crawlers, that was something that we were a huge fan of. So we have a crawler, just straight from the tap, we can fill up crawlers, and we do get a ton of requests for that. People come in for the first time and have a beer, and maybe they can't. We're pretty consistent with 7 to 10 beers on tap, so you're probably not going to get through them all, but I think once they've had 1 or 2, they know that the quality is sort of what they're looking for, and so they're excited to take something home. So that's been we're a huge fan of the crawler. It takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it.
Actually, my first time in, I had John himself make my 4-pack of cans for me. Very well put together. They held up for
finely crafted.
One of those held up for at least a month. It was absolutely perfect. So my hat tip to John on that one.
Thank you.
All right, we got to get back into this beer tasting.
Yeah, we got to drink some more beer.
Yeah,
I'm getting thirsty over here.
What do you guys want to explain or tell us a little bit about the next one?
So this is the Bayview Brunch. It's a brown ale with coffee and maple syrup. It's a recipe that myself and a group at the Barley to Barrel program. So I did the Barley to Barrel program. This was the recipe that we came up with. I tweaked it a little bit for our brewery.
Is that the reason why it's Bayview Brunch 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the difference then between 1 and 2?
The malt bill's a little different. That's about it.
So Andy couldn't make tonight's interview, but he did have a question specifically about the Barley the Barrel program. For our listeners who may not know, this is a local program that is set up for aspiring brewers that want to get into the professional level. And we have, if you listen to any of our podcasts, we've interviewed a lot of home brewers who have gone pro. And this really seems to have helped a lot of folks. One of our friends of the show, Kyle Vetter, is a member. But Jonathan, how did that, going through that program, help you and Component get on a sure footing?
It was a really good overview of what it took to open a brewery. The other great thing about the program was that I got good connections in the industry. The insurance person who holds our insurance here was the guy who came and presented the logo, like you talked about earlier. She did our logo for our Barley to Barrel beer. So good connections and a good overview of really what it took. And when I went in, it was either this program will tell me if I wanted to continue with opening a brewery or just say, forget it, I'm walking away. And after I was done, I was like, yeah, we should do this.
So what were some of those lessons learned through that program?
Well, it might not be the most sexy one, but TTP, somebody came in and talked about licensing and how to get our licensing through the federal government, and gave us some really good tips, and we got ours a lot faster than we expected. And there are other examples, but that was probably one of the most beneficial.
It's true, because people, a lot of homebrewers think like, "Oh, I can just open a brewery," but the permits, the licensing, the branding,
got something else to say about that.
There's quite a bit involved with that. So to have gone through that as you guys have, and to come out the other side with a fairly successful brewery in your first year here, I don't know. Tip our hat to you guys. You guys are doing quite well with it.
Let's get back to the beer that we're tasting here. Can you tell us a little bit about what is going into this and what, Jim? I guess what do you taste in this one?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting brown ale. It is very malt forward, though. It's definitely a more European brown, though, than I was kind of expecting. I was expecting more of an American brown, which is kind of a mini stout porter, right? It's very malt forward, but kind of roasty. This is malt forward, but has that dry, crisp kind of flavor to it. Tell us a little more just about this beer and the grist bill, and is it an oatmeal brown?
There's no oatmeal. Oh, wait, there are oats.
This is one of the exciting things about dealing with a brewery this small, right? We're exploring new territories with beers. We're taking chances that big breweries, and we see it here, right? You look at the Godfathers of Milwaukee Brewing, Sprecher, and Lakefront. They're not cutting edge by any means, right? They've got their core styles.
Yeah, I would say that the big breweries would be scared to death to try some styles that you guys are doing like on a daily basis, and that's the advantage that you guys have over the big boys, is that you guys are able to put some stuff out like this and then tweak it, or do whatever you want with it. How many beers would you say that you guys have brewed since you guys have been in operation?
84.
That's a very specific number.
84 batches. How many different beers?
I feel like 84. John changes it every time.
Yeah. We do a fair amount of tweaking. It's nothing extreme usually, but we tweak things as needed. Bayview Brunch is one that doesn't get tweaked. Funny enough, we actually like that kind of strange, that it's different and that it isn't sort of what might be expected. But yeah, I don't know how many. Maybe. There's been a lot of one-offs too, where it's literally one barrel. And we had an ESB when we first started that. I demanded an ESB, and it didn't sell, and we never made it again. And I'm still kind of bummed about it because it was really good. But there's just stuff that's the rarity. Usually it's stuff that goes really fast, or we'll take down the road and put in strawberry and pineapple into it. Something like that, and it's just gone the next weekend. So we don't always go back to those. We kind of just keep pushing it. We keep doing something different. We kind of can't help ourselves. So
Yeah, so guys your size, they love to brew what they like to drink, but you do have to temper that with demand. So how do you kind of track that demand, and do you go, oh my God, I can't believe this beer was so popular, we got to brew more of it?
No, it's the other way around. It's like, why did no one want to drink an ESB? Come on. I mean,
come on, people.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's get on board the ESB train here.
And I've seen a few around, lately too, and I'm always like, oh, we got to try it again, I guess. It's back in.
It'll come back around.
Yeah.
It's coming back around.
Yeah, I think with our size, it's easy to see what goes fast, but everything kind of goes fast. When you're making one barrel, and like you said, the yield thing we didn't really get to, but I mean, you every stout, every heavy beer, every New England, it is a struggle. But I don't think we let that obviously, the trade-off there is we know we're going to sell it fast, it's going to be fresh, it's going to be done quick, it's going to be made and out the door. So yeah, we never really talked about that. I mean, we talk about it when we're spraying out of the fermenter, a ton of hops, and it's like, wow, there's definitely some beer in there too. But that's really it. It doesn't at our size, it doesn't keep us from doing anything.
How about we've talked to enough brewers that we know that as well as things go most of the time, things go haywire an unexpected amount of the time. Any fun stories? Any crazy experiences that you guys have had so far?
I think most of them have been with the Bright Tank, haven't they?
A lot of beer spraying all over the cooler.
It's luckily a small setup, but those Bright Tanks, you might just accidentally leave the top valve open on occasion when you're filling them up, and when you're by yourself or someone's not paying attention, we tend to multitask like a lot of people do, and all of a sudden you didn't realize that you'd moved as much beer as you thought into there, and some of it's on the floor or on the ceiling or wherever it might be. It's usually John, I think. I don't know. I got to be honest. Steve?
I didn't want to say that, yeah. But yes. But I've seen him soaked a couple times.
John, any comments?
We did talk about the main person who did most of the work.
Yeah, John does most of the work, so he gets most of he's got most of the problems.
So we finished up the tap takeover, but we always want to leave one tap left over for something for the beer nerds, something that's very unique to you guys. I know you said that you do a lot of one-offs. What is that one beer that you just made one batch of? I know for you it's ESB. That is like
real exciting.
That is like, holy cow! I wish more people would like this. This is amazing. I mean, you guys want to just tell us?
What would be the special release beer when you guys start doing that kind of thing?
Barrel aged one was definitely exciting for us.
Definitely the biggest beer.
Yeah, the biggest beer we've ever done, and
as far as having the barrel and all that.
Yeah, the most things that could go wrong probably because we had no idea what we're doing.
And did it max out your mash tun?
Yeah, those we've actually gone to splitting the batch up. So instead of trying to get
doing double mashes.
Yeah, because it's just you just can't get enough yield like we were talking about. You just can't. It's not worth it. Why do you put 15 gallons of wort into a fermenter? So the lesson learned on that one. We've stuck a few. We've had some time spent trying to unstick that stout before, so that was the lesson learned.
Yeah, I'm curious to know too. You guys have limited space. What would you say your barrel capacity is at when you guys do a barrel aged
one barrel?
Just the one?
We've got two 15-gallon barrels back there. I think that's probably too many.
Yeah. They're kind of right in the mix with everything else, so less than ideal.
So just talking about, just to wrap up this, I want to talk about you guys are doing individual batches. So do you still have a preferred house yeast, or are you going at each batch with its own specific yeast profile?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the beer. So we'll, pitch for the New England or for our Mosaic Theory.
I mean, we're doing a mix of liquid and dry.
Okay. So do you have a preferred vendor, or do you just I like Sapphire US05, it's dry for something clean, but then I want some London Ale 3 for our New Englands, and then obviously a lager yeast.
We put ale yeast into the...
Loaded question.
Yeah. Words are hard.
That's our gotcha journalism right there.
Do you have a preferred vendor that you like to get your source your yeast from, or because you guys are really at a scale?
Quick answer, no.
It is a good
Whatever
question.
Northern Brewer has on tap.
Yeah,
actually.
we are still at that size where
He
it's
doesn't want to say where it comes from. Or
Yeah.
we're at that size where we can experiment quite a bit. We do use the same. We consistently use the same ones, but when we first started, it was sort of a, well, let's try this and let's try that, and to be honest, they usually, the first time we would, if it worked, we stuck with it. We weren't going to mess with that. But it does become challenging when you start to scale that up, and because the size that we want for a 1-barrel pitch doesn't really exist sometimes. It's a little more challenging to get. So some companies have worked with us, and others kind of are just like, well, just go buy the packet from Northern Brewer.
I mean, that's really got to be a challenge, right? I mean, you look at a lot of brewers, they're either repitching, reusing yeast for a couple of generations, or they're buying at commercial scale from Omega or Y Yeast or White Labs.
As we're wrapping up, I guess the last thing we want to know is what are your plans for this coming year here? Any big plans for 2019 and any beer festivals our listeners can go check you out at?
Yeah, so far we'll be at Stein and Dine, and then of course with the summer coming up, we did
Sourfest a couple weeks.
Sourfest a couple weeks in Mobcraft. Did what was the big one at
Milwaukee Beer Fest.
Yeah, Milwaukee Beer Fest. I mean, any that'll accept a small brewery like us, that'll take us. We'll be at. We're looking at trying to look for places to do a beer garden on our own. We thought would be really great, especially if it's not every weekend. If it's kind of a more one-off or a few times a summer event, so we can keep up with capacity. And as far as upcoming beer releases, we're looking at the 1840 collaboration. Yeah, so we've got a very interesting beer coming out with them. We'll leave it under wraps, but
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be at both places?
Yeah, which is
because you guys are like 5 blocks, right?
Yeah. We'll just carry the kegs over from there. It'll be easy.
Can you let us know what sort of style you guys are brewing? I mean, it's Kyle at 1840, so I would expect it to be a New England style IPA, but any
It's been in a barrel for a while.
Okay, not an IPA.
So maybe something from the area of Belgium.
No, I think more Derby related. So,
so
something big.
Brett. So when I think Derby, I think horse, and I think wet horse, and that tells me Brett Buck.
Think Kentucky. Think bourbon.
No, I think tasting a wet horse, which would be some Brettanomyces, right?
Yeah, I think we're all going the opposite way, Jim.
Yeah, some mixed fermentation there.
Yeah.
You're right.
Maybe mixed fermentation in a bourbon barrel, huh?
Right.
All right. So, any last thoughts that you'd like to leave our listeners with? What can our listeners expect coming into your brewery for the first time? What sort of attitude are you guys bringing? What sort of environment do you guys want them to experience?
Yeah, very family friendly. Sort of laid back place. It's hard to find. If you've never been here, if you've never been to the building, it can be a challenge, but well worth the walk up the flight of stairs. Yeah, it's something because we have kids. We've always kind of had this. I mean, there's hungry hippos across the way here. It's dogs are welcome, kids are welcome. So we just try to be as sort of a comfortable, cozy spot that you can come and have a beer. And we're sports fans too, so there's definitely a TV on if there's sports going on. So,
well, I think that's going to do it for us for now. It looks like we are all out of beer for the moment. Make sure if you're listening now, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So subscribe for updates, and you can find all of our content and all of our links on social media on our website at taptakeoverpodcast.com. So for Alex,
this is Jim,
Jonathan,
Steve,
DJ,
Jesus,
and that's going to do it for us. This has been another solid non-fail production.
He said there's no